Hello and welcome to Breakthroughs with Bree, where we are discussing all the topics that create extraordinary breakthroughs in our personal and spiritual development journeys. I'm Bree, otherwise known as Healing with Bree, and I'm a spiritual coach and Akashic Records channelers who helps sensitives and intuitives connect more deeply with their hearts, intuition, and souls, and teaches people how to process and alchemize the fears and beliefs that hold them back from living in their authenticity and purpose. You're in the right place if you like to hear about spirituality, psychology, healing, consciousness, manifestation, developing your spiritual and intuitive gifts, and living from your heart and soul instead of from your fears and ego. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Breakthroughs with Bree. We are back for season 3. I'm so excited. I have a great feeling about where this season is going, about the kind of information and energy that the guides want to bring through for us, especially in today's episode where we're going to talk about a topic I've been dying to speak about for a hot minute, and that is soul leadership. We're going to talk about what it means to be led from our soul energy today, especially in the midst of feeling some of those ego patterns or other types of emotions kick up when we're feeling really afraid, or we're feeling deep in guilt, or we're feeling depressed or anxious, or like when we're in the grip of energy that we know is not our heart and soul, what that can look like to let our soul kind of take the lead of the ship. This is something I've had a lot of personal experiences with lately that has really changed the game for me and changed the game for the clients that I've been working with, my one-on-one coaching clients. I've shared some of this on community coaching calls, and it's been really beautiful, and I'm so excited to talk about it more with you today. On that note, if you didn't know, I am doing monthly community calls where I'm answering questions, providing channeled messages, and coaching to anybody in my community who joins a live Zoom call once a month. What's kind of cool about these calls is it's almost like a curated, personalized podcast episode. If you like the kind of information I bring through, if you like the way I explain things, then you get to come into the Zoom call. First of all, you get to meet some of the most amazing people that are in my community. They're so wonderful. They're so supportive. And you get to ask your question, any type of question, to me, to the guides. And not only am I able to give you like an at-length answer, but if you have follow-up questions or anything like that, I go through question and answers for the whole call together. I usually do some sort of like meditation, little bit of like an energy healing kind of tune up at the beginning as well. And it's really such a special thing. You also get a replay of these calls for 7 days. If for some reason you're not able to make it, you can send in questions ahead of time, or simply if you just want to listen back. And they're really beautiful spaces. I just was feeling my guides wanting to be able to bring this kind of energy and information to you guys, and to bring it to you guys in a way that feels really accessible, because it feels like a lot of people need or would feel supported really by the love and perspective that our guides and our higher selves want to bring through for us. So a ticket for these calls is only $11, and you get to get access to a very transformative space, connection with other people, personalized answered questions, coaching from me. And if you've not done a session with me before, and maybe you wanted to meet or say hi or get a feel of if my style is something that works for you or that you want to invest in at some point in the future, these are a wonderful way to come say hi. So I highly encourage that. You can find that on the link in my show description, or you can find that on my website. It's a different date every month, usually the first or second Sunday of the month at 5 p.m. PST, and I hope to see you guys there. Let's dive into this. I'm so excited. Guys, where do you want me to start with this? They want me to start with the story that initiated this whole concept. And before I get into that, I'm just going to lay the groundwork a little bit for what I mean by all of this. Some of the language that I use to explain the difference between acting from your intuition, from your heart, from your soul, is that you're being led by your soul energy. There's other energy that can come up. There's other ideas. There's other motivations. There's other feelings that can come up in our body that are still coming from a part of us, but they tend to be rooted in fear. And these are energies of control or urgency or comparison or jealousy or anxiety or shame. Like all of these things are generated by our ego self, our ego mind. And there's so much wisdom in them. They are not enemies, but when we act on fear, we kind of create a self-fulfilling prophecy, and we don't tend to have the most pleasant experience experiences, nor do we usually get the results that we really want. So what I really love to help teach people is how can you tune into and identify, differentiate what's really coming from your soul and intuition versus what energy is coming from your ego. Some of that ego stuff might be very obvious, and when that's the case and it still feels like it's got a grip on you, I love help teaching people tools, like actual processes and resources and tools that they can use to move through that energy, to have healing, to alchemize it, and come out on the other end feeling like you can really be centered in that soul energy and how you move and what motivates you and what intentions you have. It's a much more free and open and expansive and loving and peaceful and joyful kind of energy to move from. And that's really where our power lies. So when I'm talking about like the soul leading the way, or, noticing the ego energies, I just wanted to give a little bit of a framework of what I'm talking about with all of that if you've not heard one of my episodes of me explaining that before. And just a little note on this, one thing that's going to help, I'm going to talk a little bit about it in this episode, but one thing that's going to help majorly is the more familiar you are with how spirit, how source, how God, how the universe and its unconditional love energy feels, the easier it's going to be able to tell when something's not that. And what I found, and I just had this experience with somebody doing an Akashic Records channeling session this last week, is that we can actually be a little bit fearful to come into deeper contact with our soul because we actually have never experienced what unconditional love is like. And so we kind of project our most recent or familiar experiences with love onto what we think our guides or higher self or angels of the universe or God will do to us. And if those were not experiences of unconditional love, those don't sound very fun. Those actually can sound really scary and sort of punitive and ultimately not very supportive. So of course there is hesitation. Of course there's a resistance to like going to a place that doesn't actually feel good. Because again, we just haven't experienced actual unconditional love that feels the way that source, that spirit, that the universe, that God feels when you're actually connected and receiving that kind of love. So part of it, what I feel like is going to make this whole concept that I explain a little easier for people, is spend more time with the energy of your higher self, of your guides, with God, the universe, spirit, whatever language you like. Spend more time with that energy. Spend more time with people that really feel like they got it. They understand it. Not that they're perfect at it, but they get it and that they're humble in that. And that really feel like they're able to express the compassion and the grace and the wisdom and really the calmness and serenity that comes from being plugged into that source and soul energy place. Because you can learn a lot from people who embody it about what it's really like. Read books, like do what you can to expand your experiences and your awareness to really know what that feels like so that you can tell when in your own self if it's coming from that unconditional love place or if it's coming from something else, which means it's coming from the ego. The guides want me to share a little bit more about that session I'm referring to. And I met with the most wonderful woman. I'm so happy to have met her, and she's had some struggles, and she has a really, really loud inner critic. She has a very loud sort of like inner shaming, inner judgment. Like, why can't you figure it out? You should be doing this. It's just like a really harsh inner voice. And the Akashic Record Keepers and her guides were really trying to help give her some insight and show her that that's not effective and that she doesn't need to be doing that. That's not helping her and it's not true. Very encouraging, which the guides always are, and I'm so grateful for how compassionate and graceful they are in any situation, in any reading. And at the end of the session, she said, this is exactly what I needed. So glad I followed my gut to book this session, but I was really afraid. I knew that I wanted to connect with my guides, but I felt kind of afraid and I was resisting it. And I'm so glad that I didn't, because it was such a different experience than I thought it would be. And we talked about it, and we were able to identify that she was kind of expecting her guides to almost act like her parents used to act. Like with this, you should be doing this, and why aren't you doing this? And it's very corrective, it's very punitive, it's very authoritarian. And again, that was her understanding love and support through the lens of the only type of love and support she's ever really experienced. And so she almost expected her soul energy, her higher self, her guides, for spirit to love her that way too. And it was really beautiful. We were able to identify, like, no, source and our higher selves and our soul, like, that comes from unconditional love. There's never a shaming. There's never a judgment. Never. We are only ever met with like softness and compassion and grace and love. only ever. And it was kind of emotional for her and also for me to feel the dots put together, how much we crave and we really need our spiritual connection, whatever that looks like, so that we can truly understand and feel that unconditional love that we are. Like, our essence is unconditional love, but also that we deserve to experience. And how many people on this planet have never experienced it and never opened themselves up to. So that was just a little aside, again, about how important it is for us to understand the essence of source, the essence of spirit, the essence of God, the essence of unconditional love, as we start to do some of this healing work, as we start to connect with our intuition, as we start to try and live lives led from our soul, because we have to understand what that soul essence even is if we're going to be able to be like, yep, that's my North Star. I'm headed in that direction. Okay, so let's talk about my example of this concept of soul leadership, how it happened, where it came from. I was going to a yoga class in a local studio here. I hadn't done in-person yoga in such a long time. I'd only ever done it like through YouTube at home on my own mat. And I have been working through some health stuff and trying to get back into, a level of fitness that I used to be. I used to be like an athlete and all this kind of stuff and blah, 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 blah. So I'm in this yoga class and I'm really trying to be present in my body and just present with myself and not just to the physical movement and distract myself so I don't feel the pain or something. But I was really trying to be present with it. And while I was present in it, I started to feel some difficulty. Like, the yoga flow was challenging me. And I started to get a little bit kind of like lightheaded, dizzy a little bit. And I did what I know to do, which is, take a knee, essentially. I went into a child's pose and just took my time. And this was a beautiful studio and a beautiful person facilitating the class. So I had no fear of being judged by her or anybody in the room. I felt safe to do that. But while I was in this child pose, I felt such a big wave of shame and of judgment. And it almost made me kind of emotional. And it was almost this story of how could you let yourself get to this place where this simple of a yoga flow would make you feel this bad? How could you let yourself get out of this much out of shape? What are you doing in this yoga class? You're not in shape enough to be here, right? And it was just a sense of shame about the level of fitness that I was at, the place in my health and where my body was at, and shame about, kind of pushing myself out of my comfort zone to go to this yoga class to, start to really challenge my body a little bit in a healthy place, and just shame and judgment and harshness. And it was ugh. And then I had this moment. It's somebody snapped, changed the channel. And instead of me looking through the eyes of that person that was feeling shame and was judging myself, it's all of a sudden I was standing next to myself and I was looking at these parts of myself. They seemed like two different parts. It felt like the part that was ashamed and then also the part that was the critic and the judge. Those felt like two distinct parts. And if you've heard about the work I do, I love doing parts work. I imagine all of these different emotions as different parts or aspects of myself. So I'm stepping aside and I see these two aspects of myself and there's a certain look about them, but I am all of a sudden in this very calm and serene and sort of mature and wise energy. And I can sense that this is my higher self, you could say, or my soul energy. And my soul energy is not bothered at all by anything. It's not bothered that I'm a little dizzy. It's not bothered that I'm a little out of shape. It's not bothered by any of it. And I feel this rush of compassion for these parts of myself that are sitting there suffering, basically for no reason, right? And I felt this phrase come through of this is allowed and you're allowed to be here. And to me, what that meant was, one, this experience of me feeling a little out of shape or whatever, it is allowed. There's nothing wrong with me going to a yoga class, especially with the intention of trying to get improve my physical fitness. In order to improve your physical fitness, you got to feel a little challenged. It's literally a part of the game. But one, it's okay. It's okay that if where I'm at and where my body's at right now, when it's doing its best, maybe it can't do the whole class. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's fine. It's allowed to be exactly like this. It's allowed. It's not threatening anything. It's not some indication of my character or my capability. It's not limiting me in any way. It's fine. And then that you're allowed to be here felt like it was directed towards these two parts of myself that were piping up at the way that this whole incident triggered me. And this part of myself that did feel shame about the state to which things have gotten, you could say. Like there was so much compassion for her, so much compassion for her. And I felt that like soul self, that soul version of myself be like, you are allowed to be here. We're going to keep moving. We're going to keep going on with this yoga class, and we're going to stay in this energy of it's all allowed and it's okay. And if you need to stay here for a minute with us, that's okay too. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to change. It was almost like, I know how hard you've had it. And I can completely understand why you would have responded to this situation the way that you did. And it's okay. You're allowed. You're allowed to be here with love. You're totally allowed to be here. And then to the judging, harsh critic, which felt like a little bit of a protector energy over the shame part, right? Same thing to that part. I understand why this is the way that you talk about us. I understand that this is the way that you react to this. And it's okay. It's okay. I know the story that you have about this isn't actually true. My soul self knows that, right? And I can see why this has been the response for so long. And it's okay. You're also allowed to hang out here if the energy of this part is alive in my body. Like you're allowed to be here. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep going with this yoga class. We're going to keep going with this really soul-led energy and perspective about this. But if you need to be here, you're allowed. You're allowed. I'm going to take the lead for us. It felt like my soul self said, I'm going to take the lead. I'm going to be gentle with us. Don't worry. And you guys are allowed. And it was a really emotional experience, fully tearing up in my child's pose. And had a good little cry after the yoga session too. And this concept of soul leadership was really born in that moment. Because it almost felt like what happened was I got caught up in the very intense emotion of one part that came to the surface because I had a trigger, right? I talk about trigger alchemy. This is one of those moments where all of a sudden, like, oof, really strong emotion, and one aspect of my psyche, of my personality, has really risen to the surface and is alive, right? And without me even realizing it, I am looking through the eyes of that part. It's almost like I'm possessed by that part of myself. I'm fully in their line of thinking. I'm fully bought into it. Like that is my reality. We could say of that part that felt kind of ashamed, okay? And it felt like all it took was a moment of awareness that what I am is bigger than this moment of shame, is bigger than this ego pattern, because that's what it is. And all it took was that awareness for me to snap, all of a sudden be looking through the eyes of my soul self at this situation and at the parts that were alive in my body. Then it was a choice to stay in my soul perspective because I believed her perspective more. I believed her truth about this more. It felt more true to me how she was looking at this situation than how this part of myself that was full of shame or this part of myself that was full of judgment than how they were looking at it. My soul's wise and compassionate and unbothered and unhurried, like that felt more true. So I chose that perspective to move from that point on. And how she related to these parts of myself was how I then was relating to these parts of myself, right? So again, if we think of like, even like in a video game, like looking through the eyes of our characters, we're walking through like, boom, you've switched characters and you're looking through the eyes of another character. And that's like the point of view that you have. Choosing the point of view of your soul, even when you have energies that are really alive and really agitated in your body, can be something that is so powerful and can start to change the game in terms of you not only experiencing something different, like actually experiencing new things and breaking patterns, but also starting to manifest very different circumstances in your body. And in this circumstance, we'll talk about health because this is a big one. The reason why I was doing this yoga class is because I felt inspired from a soul place that was the kind of action that not only was aligned with my heart, but was aligned with this vision that I had for myself where I was really healthy and vital. Like as I meditated on that image and really embodied that energy, I was like, oh, I want to go to a yoga class. So I did that. And me being able to move through this moment of shame or self-judgment or whatever is vital for me to keep doing the thing that feels like it's in alignment with the version of myself that has exactly what I want, and therefore continue to manifest that coming to life. Are you kind of picking up what I'm putting down? For us to be able to learn this skill or learn this idea of stepping into our soul perspective is what can allow us to move through some of those blocks or resistance points, or really what it is the energies that are unresolved and in pain that have sort of prevented us from moving farther than we've ever have before towards change and towards new things. Another way that I like to think about this is, and again, I don't know if everybody has had like a really good boss. like literally at their work, like a boss who's managed a team or managed a unit or managed a location or something like that. I know not everybody's worked in those scenarios, but this is the way that I kind of think about it. Like, think about the qualities of some of the best bosses you've ever worked for, because essentially they're leaders of your workplace. Okay. Some of the qualities that I think of that make really good bosses are people that, one, have that kind of like calm and grounded energy about them. They're present. They're not stressed and freaking the heck out, because when we're stressed and freaked out, we're not in receptive mode, and we also cannot actually receive and connect ideas to create solutions effectively. That's like a neurological thing as well as an energetic thing. Okay. They're calm, they're grounded, they're present, and they have an air of confidence about them. But the best bosses I've worked for are not arrogant. They are confident because they trust themselves to be able to problem solve and navigate situations as they come, and not necessarily alone. They're willing to collaborate, they're willing to take in new information, but the core of it is that they trust themselves, right? They trust the resources at hand, they trust their own judgment, and they're able to have that sort of quiet confidence about them of, it's going to be okay, we're going to figure this out, and it's going to be fine, right? Other qualities of bosses that I had that are really good are those who are really tuned in to their team, and they're able to sort of tap into the strengths and maybe even keep an eye on weaknesses of people on the team, right? They build people up, they see the best in them, they're able to communicate and leverage all of the different aspects of who is on their team so that the group collectively can move towards something positive or move towards a goal or something that they want. Another thing of bosses that I think are really good are bosses that can listen to feedback, right? Where they've not individually and only on their own decided the vision, the goal, the whatever for the team, where they have taken into account, or they collaborate with the different parts on this team, right? To where everybody feels like they're on board for where we're going. And if there's feedback or information that the leader, the manager, the boss did not have, they're actually open to hear it from the people who are boots on the ground, right? If there's some contingency that maybe they hadn't realized because they hadn't experienced, or some idea that they hadn't thought of, right? They're actually listening to and taking into consideration what's coming from the team. And ultimately, I personally also feel like people who are great leaders, great bosses, great managers, they also have this energy of like, I just want to see all of us win. I want to see all of us get to a place of like a shared success here. Like, this isn't just about me. This isn't like I want my metrics to look great. I want all of us to feel like we are in a good spot collectively. And I'm willing to push myself. I'm willing to use every tool and every skill that I have to help make that happen. And even when things are uncertain, even if the manager or the boss themselves isn't quite sure what to do, or if the team is distraught or in disarray, right? A really good boss knows that it's their time to step in as the leader. That sometimes there does have to be a little bit of a like, we all are bought in on this goal. We know that this is what we really want. And so I got to keep us on the course here so that we can keep taking one step at a time towards what we want. Now, let me translate this into the whole soul leadership kind of thing. There are always our whole life going to be times when these energies and these patterns and these thoughts and these stories of the ego mind and then the emotions that are still living in the body are going to activate, are going to be triggered, and for a moment are even going to feel like they kind of possess us for a second, right? And that's going to happen our entire lives. There's not a version of being human where that's not happening for you on some level. Okay. It's just how it is. And that's part of the magic. Okay. But this concept to me is, can we choose which part of ourselves we're letting take the lead? Which part of ourselves is motivating our action? Which part of ourselves is setting the intention of what we're doing, how we're thinking about ourselves, and therefore how we are being in our lives? And what I think is so beautiful about even that personal example that I had on that yoga mat was that the other team members don't have to disappear. They don't have to be kicked out. They don't have to be silenced in order for the soul to be the leader here, to step up to the plate and lead the team here, right? In fact, when we learn more about the soul energy and the way that it approaches things like healing and coming into greater authenticity and power, etc., is that it's actually bringing these parts into the fold with more compassion, but from that soul, spirit, heart-centered perspective. And for those of you who've ever done coaching with me or group programs or heard a little bit more about my trigger alchemy process, the other beautiful thing that the soul leader does is it takes into consideration what these triggered parts of ourselves are really bringing to the table. There's a kernel of wisdom that is there with these triggered parts, right? And the soul, it does a really good job of seeing that like kernel of wisdom in there for us and honoring that, honoring what that really vulnerable, triggered part of ourselves is really saying when it gets activated. And when we're able to honor that, bring compassion to that, bring gentleness and love to that, while still acting in a way that's aligned with our heart, that's aligned with our intuition, aka being led from our soul, is how we start to turn the tide in our life, able to make progress towards what we want while still healing and finding integration and finding wholeness all the time. We don't have to be a perfect version of ourselves to start accomplishing the things that we want. And in fact, the beauty of it is when we can learn how to always be this transforming vessel that's going through metamorphosis and still having wins and feeling successful and feeling actualized and making our way on our path to all of our biggest dreams and all of our hopes and aspirations coming true, because we don't have to wait for one or the other. They can happen simultaneously. And it feels like this perspective of how can I step into that soul perspective and how can I really lean on the wisdom that comes through me when I'm in that energy to lead how I want to move forward. Another example of this is sometimes I get like a Monday blues, or I have a history of experiencing some of that dorsal vagal nervous system response, which is kind of like a depressed kind of feeling. And like, I'm just not motivated to do anything. And I just like want to couch rot, you know? It's sort of like a functional freeze is another thing that people call it, right? Like I can find myself in that energy sometimes. That's one of the places that my body can revert to when it gets triggered. And sometimes I don't even exactly know why. It's just I wake up one day and I'm in that energy and I'm in a funk, right? Even on those days, all it takes is a moment of me being able to step outside of that story, of that narrative, really of that neural pathway almost, of that part of myself who is really feeding into the story of I feel funky and I don't feel good and I don't feel motivated and I don't want to do this and I just want to sit here and, you know, whatever that story is of that part of myself that resorts to that sits in that energy, all of a sudden, boom, snapped into another perspective. And I can see that that part of myself is feeling really alive today. And maybe she's feeling really overwhelmed. Maybe she's feeling underneath it all a little anxious. Maybe she's feeling a little tired, but she's also maybe feeling not as connected with her joy and her vitality and the things that excite her as much as she needs to be and she wants to be in order to live that really full and joyful life, right? My soul self can see that. My soul self has that wisdom and that perspective. So even on those days, I can step into that soul perspective and I can be like, how would my soul lead me through this right now? And that does not mean like getting up and, you know, ignoring the part of myself and the energy that's alive in me that's feeling a little bit funky. Right? It might be okay. I know that we feel a little funky right now. I know that the team is feeling a little funky right now. We are still going to move towards things that help make us happy and healthy, but why don't we meet in the middle? Why don't we kind of meet our edge here? Maybe what that looks like is like, let's take a shower, or let's put on a podcast that we know really encourages us, or let's get outside and just take a walk and just start there. It might just be little steps towards the big goal that we have, the most ideal way that we want to feel, while still honoring and not pushing ourselves past where our body is at in that moment, and not sort of like ignoring or repressing the parts of ourselves that need a little bit of TLC sometimes. Let me see if the guides have maybe one more example of this. Okay, they're saying in relationships. They're showing me like a couple fighting, or maybe like friends fighting, or like family members fighting or something like that. And they're showing me that like in those moments, especially if you can get away and like take a breather, go to the bathroom, like take a deep breath, you know, you can kind of step outside of yourself and you can see like a part of yourself that wants to lock horns with somebody, right? That just wants to lock horns in this pattern and really go down fighting, right? And again, the soul has wisdom, especially as you spend more time with the soul and you learn some of these tools that it has for seeing past the bullshit, you know? is that you can see that maybe there's a part that is feeling very vulnerable, right? That's feeling misunderstood or not seen or maybe taken advantage of, or there's a part that is feeling like it needs to be protected and defended in some way, or maybe there's even a dynamic where there's other people that we're viewing as a victim that need to be protected and defended, in this very intense political season. Maybe we're like fighting for the sake of other people, right? Like whatever that is, we see the part of ourselves that's engaged in that pattern that really doesn't feel like it's 100% coming from our soul energy, right? And our soul self is there and it's like, it's okay. It's fine. We have so much compassion. We have so much understanding. It doesn't like bother the soul. It doesn't taint the soul for us to have parts of ourselves who act like a fool, Like they're not bothered by it. They're very calm. This is my experience of my soul self. And they can see that there's like a little adjustment. There's a little pivot that we can make towards embodying and being more in the flow of that unconditional love energy than maybe that pattern is presenting. So maybe letting our soul take the lead instead of this ego pattern or this fear in that example might be you going out and saying, hey, I'm feeling really activated by this. I'm feeling really worked up about this, but our relationship is important to me too. And I feel like I just need to leave for tonight, or, we just need to come back to this conversation another day. Like, I got to stop with this conversation because, again, I love you and our relationship is important to me and I just need a beat to kind of before I can come back to this, right? Or maybe if it's a fight that you're having with your, life partner, maybe it's you taking a beat, relaxing some of your defenses, and instead of looking at them as an adversary, starting to look at them as a teammate and thinking, how would I approach this if I really felt like my partner was a teammate here? What kind of questions would I ask? What kinds of things would I listen for? How would I describe what happened and what I want to happen in the future, right? Like, how would my soul approach this a little bit differently than my ego would? And again, I just feel, the importance to state that, like, if you've not really been around people that understand and embody this unconditional love energy, like, that might be a really hard thing for you to start to follow, right? Like even something like healthy conflict resolution skills, right? Or like being truly loving to other people without martyring yourself. Like these are things that we might not have seen examples of, that we might not fully understand how to do. And it's okay if it takes us a minute to start to learn those things so that we can embody that energy more and more. But I just really encourage you to spend some time with that. Again, go and listen and be around in spaces and places with people where it feels like you're really like soaking in and starting to understand that experience and that energy more clearly, so that in these moments and through your life, especially when you feel that trigger come up, you can take a breath, you can snap your eyes, into the point of view of your soul self, and you can really ask, like, how can my soul be a good leader to this group of parts in my consciousness? Coming back to that boss and manager energy, right? Like if I have all of these parts in me, I have a rebellious, angsty teenager, I have a weepy, crying inner child, I have a really anxious or self-conscious inner child, I have an overwhelmed and functional freeze adult, and I have this really exuberant creative child, and like all of these different parts in us, right? We have a whole team of parts in our psyche, in our brain, and our soul is the part of all of these that has the actual skills to bring the team together, move towards a common goal and a mission that feels heart aligned, and like has the energy to bring that true harmony between everything, to have of how to relate to all the parts, how to bring them together if there's some work, again, to alchemize or heal. So like our soul is the one that knows how to do that most effectively. So I hope that this concept of being able to kind of tap into them, and even in our own minds, imagining letting them be the guide and the leader of the team, and how would they do that, and how can we start to take little steps towards our heart-centered goals, our heart-centered intentions, while still honoring these other parts. I'm hoping that that concept is helpful to you all, because this is like a radical self-love. Like this is self-love. Like I love with so much tenderness, I could cry right now. The parts of me that respond to circumstances being different than something I'd hoped for with shame. There's so much I love about those parts of myself, truly, especially because I've been able to look at them through my soul eyes. The protector part of me that starts to be harsh and criticize, like she thinks that's the way that we're going to improve and get better. I love her. She's helped me so many times. It's okay. She gets to be here. It's okay. She's not leading the ship anymore. She's not leading the charge, but she gets to be here, right? And even me just allowing all of these parts, and like, you don't threaten the overall good when you're not in charge, right? Like, you get to be here. That kind of energy gives me so much relief in my body. I just feel like my whole body like relax, and it just feels like almost more refreshing. And honestly, those parts don't really want to be in charge anyway. They don't. They're struggling. That's why they're on the struggle bus. They're on the struggle bus, and that's why they're freaking out a little bit, right? All of those parts are relieved when there can be some real leadership by the part of you who is the most wise, the most loving, has the most space, has the most capacity, has the most perspective, has the most skills for problem solving, which is your soul. They're all relieved when the soul becomes an effective leader within your own body and within your own consciousness. All that to say, if you are wanting to learn a little bit more about what that soul energy really feels like versus that ego energy, I have a whole module about this in my soul powered course, which is the course that I channeled through and created with all of the fundamentals of living a soul powered and soul led life. There's a lot about intuition, connection, and development. There's a lot about soul led healing and sort of like a simple manifestation method, which is really just how can I live each day motivated and guided by my soul energy. Within that, there's a whole module about like actual lists of this is soul energy, this is ego energy. It's like a whole descriptor, so we can start to get a little bit more familiar even in our mental fields with the difference, and we can start to differentiate that. And there's meditations and things we can do in there that are so powerful and so helpful and start to give you the tools to do what I've talked about today. So if that's something that sounds interesting to you, you can check out the link in the show descriptions or my website. There's a link on my website right on the homepage to go to my digital course and content library, and that is available for you guys. It's a self-paced digital course so that you can start to work through that in your own timing and start to empower yourself with that perspective and see how that information resonates and start to learn some tools for being able to do all of this, because I'll tell you what, it feels a lot freer, feels a lot nicer, feels a lot more peaceful and joyful and fun and abundant on the other side of learning what to do with all of the funk that comes from the ego place, and starting to learn again these sort of like soul strategies and soul perspectives as an alternative is a huge relief. It was so much fun to create that course so you guys could start to learn some of that too, and that's available for you to get now. You guys will have to let me know if you have any questions on this, if you want me to elaborate, if this was something that resonated with you, or if there was stuff that was really confusing about it. I'd like hearing that too so that I can clarify if necessary. And honestly, I'm just so glad to have been here with you guys today, to have shared this energy, this perspective, this information. I hope it blesses you. I hope you take whatever resonates, and I hope to see you back next week for more breakthroughs. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Breakthroughs with Brie. But before you go, please take a moment to either rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it, or share this episode or maybe one of your other favorites with friends or loved ones that you think might enjoy or benefit from this content. Both of those things help more than you know, so that I can keep creating these episodes to help us all have more breakthroughs. Remember, you can connect with me on social media, sign up for my email list, hear what products, services, or events that I'm currently offering, all in the link in the show description, or by visiting my website, healingwithbrie.net. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support and for the time that you're taking to heal yourself and align more with your beautiful soul, as it helps us all so much more than you realize. I'll see you all next week for more breakthroughs.